You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. As promised, this will be another NBA free agency recap. This is just going to go over what happened in day 2. If you want my opinion on Lonzo Ball, Spencer Dinwiddie, Blake Griffin, etc., listen to yesterday's show. This is only going to deal with what happened yesterday. So, Kemba Walker going to the Knicks, Enes Kanter going to the Celtics, etc., that will not be discussed today. There is a chance that I do a day 3 of these NBA free agency recaps. I wouldn't bet the rent on it, but it is possible. I'll say this, whether I choose to dedicate tomorrow's show to just the NBA or I throw in some other sports, I'm going to talk about the NBA. Okay? I promise you that. So let's get into what happened yesterday. I'll start with the Atlanta Hawks. It's okay to talk about this now because the offer was made yesterday. It was agreed to today, but the offer was made yesterday. So I'm okay talking about it today. John Collins re-signing with the Hawks on a 5-year deal worth $125 million. You can't hate it. Collins was the second best player on a Hawks team that made the Eastern Conference Finals. That means he's gonna get paid. I don't mind giving him $25 million. I really don't. Collins is a great young player. Double-double threat every night. Really good defender. Can stretch the floor. Every team in the NBA could use a guy like John Collins. Give the Hawks credit for locking him up. They will make the playoffs again. There's no question about that. Will they make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals? Probably not, but they'll be good. There's no question about that. I'll skip over the Celtics because they didn't do anything. And now I will go to my beloved Brooklyn Nets. They won the Patty Mills sweepstakes. Bruce Brown signed his qualifying offer. And the Nets found their Jeff Green replacement in James Johnson. You think about the roster that the Nets are going to put out next year. Starters 1 through 5. James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and Blake Griffin. The bench, Patty Mills, Cam Thomas, Bruce Brown, James Johnson, and Nick Claxton. the reserves, and this can change, but as of right now, it's Marcus Zagorowski, Kessler Edwards, Alize Johnson, Raekwon Gray, and Day'Ron Sharpe. God only knows where DeAndre Jordan fits into that mix. That's an excellent roster. That's a roster on paper that's just as good as any in the NBA. You want to tell me the Lakers? The Lakers have a ton of talent. There's no question. I'm not knocking them. But I think the Nets are right up there. I think it's really, really close between the Nets and the Lakers. I've said this before, I'll say it again. That NBA Finals, assuming we get it, big assumption, but if we get it, will be a Finals for the ages. I mean, let me say this about Patty Mills, okay? I'm not the biggest Mills fan in the world. I don't like the fact that he's a point guard and he always looks to score first. He's not a good passer. He's not great at making his teammates look better. The thing is, though, go through that bench unit that I just mentioned. Who's better offensively than Patty Mills? No one. Thomas isn't. Brown isn't. Johnson isn't. Claxton isn't. And I gotta say this, I love the idea of James Harden and Patty Mills playing together. I'm not crazy about Mills and Kyrie. I'm not crazy about Mills and Durant. Mills and Harden I love, because Harden will set up Mills. Harden has changed his game towards becoming more of a distributor. I'll say this, there are moments that I want him to just put his head down and go. But with that being Harden's game now, surround him with shooters. Patty Mills fits that mold. Career 39% three-point shooter, shot 37.5% last year from beyond the arc. Put up 10.8 points per game last year for the Spurs. Patty Mills is just a much better Mike James. Okay, I said in the Nets offseason preview that I wanted Mike James back. I didn't think they could get a guy like Mills. The fact that they were able to get the exponentially better version of Mike James is really good. I totally understand why Sean Marks went after him. You see the Lakers adding every veteran free agent under the sun. So, yeah. You've got to respond. Just bringing back Blake Griffin isn't going to be enough. Sign Patty Mills. Sign a guy who the Lakers wanted. It's going to be interesting to see how Mills plays in a lineup with Irving, Harris, Durant, and insert other front court player here. He's got to distribute more. I don't want him taking a bunch of shots. If he's out there with the whole bench unit, okay, take over. I have no problem with that. But if you're playing with guys like Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, and let's be honest, James Harden too. Harden needs to take more shots. You've got to distribute the ball if you're Mills. You can take some shots. Don't take a bunch. Bruce Brown was an excellent fit on the Nets. I know some people didn't like the lack of offense that he brought. but he's a really good defender. Can guard multiple positions. Very good cutter. If someone misses a three, Brown is usually there to tip in the offensive rebound. He's a pest. He's a mosquito. That's who Bruce Brown is. There were rumors that Brown would get a multi-year deal in free agency with a starting value of $9 million. Instead, he got a one-year deal worth $4.7 million. He signed his qualifying offer. Now, what that means is he'll be an unrestricted free agent next year. But does anyone really care? No one cares about the 22-23 season for the Nets. It's all about 21-22. It does bring up an interesting question. If the Nets win the NBA Finals next year, and the big three leave, how would you feel as a Nets fan? They just won you a title, the first title that you've ever gotten in the NBA, but they all leave? You'd probably be okay with it. Realize, after LeBron won Cleveland a title and then went to the Lakers, no one burned his jersey. After Kawhi won a title for the Raptors and went to the Clippers, no one was burning his jersey. I mean, there is a nightmare scenario here. The Nets don't win anything, and the big three leave. If the Nets win, the big three are staying. I'd be very surprised if any of them left. If they win a title in Brooklyn. If they don't win a title, that brings up some interesting questions. But let's not worry about that now. Let's worry about the upcoming 21-22 season and how good of a fit Bruce Brown is for that year's Nets team. That was an excellent trade by Sean Marks. James Johnson is a really physical player, very good defensively. He's an enforcer. He's a guy who, if Durant, Harden, or Kyrie get into it with someone, Johnson's going to come running in and say, you don't pick on them, you pick on me. You understand? The thing is, though, what did the Nets really need in their backup power forward? They needed size so he could rebound the basketball, and they needed him to be able to stretch the floor. That's not James Johnson. Last year, James Johnson had just under 2 rebounds per game. He's a career 30.5% three-point shooter. You think about how the Nets offense operates, James Johnson just doesn't fit that. He's really good defensively. He's a better defender than Jeff Green. But he's not going to rebound very well. He's not going to give you much offensively. I'm really surprised that the Nets went after James Johnson. That Nets roster that I just ran through, there's one glaring omission to it. A true rebounder. Who's the best rebounder on the Nets? I'm not counting Kevin Durant. Durant's a freak. I'm talking about a guy who's going to fight for every loose ball. Not necessarily hit the deck for it like a Blake Griffin, but when the shot is missed, someone who's going to jockey for that loose ball and is going to get it for his team. Yes, Durant does that, but he doesn't need to. Someone else can fill that role and the Nets won't lose anything. Who's that guy? Is it Nick Claxton? Is it Day'Ron Sharpe? Is it Reggie Perry? Is it Alize Johnson? The answer is probably Johnson, but you don't want him playing a lot. He may not even be on the Nets in 3 months. The Nets had a hole at backup power forward, and they filled it with a tenacious defender, a physical player. A guy who will defend his superstar teammates at the drop of a hat. But they still don't have a great rebounder. They really don't have a stretch four. Let's be honest. Kristaps Porzingis fits this roster perfectly. I'm telling you, Joe Harris, DeAndre Jordan, and Nick Claxton to the Mavericks for Kristaps Porzingis. I may even ask for a pick or two coming back with Porzingis. You'd get a rebounder, you'd get a ton of size, someone whose defense has improved, someone who can stretch the floor. If you were to write down on a piece of paper what the Brooklyn Nets need, it would look a lot like Kristaps Porzingis. And with Porzingis, the Nets pull ahead of the Lakers by a comfortable margin. Right now, they're neck and neck. With Porzingis, the Nets pull ahead. The Hornets signed Ish Smith to a 2-year deal worth $9 million. That's a really good move for the Hornets. They lost Devontae Graham to the Pelicans. So yeah, replace Graham with Smith. Someone who can score if he needs to, distributes really well. Not a great defender, but he's 6 feet tall. He can be forgiven for that. Short King, stand up. He's built like a pencil. 6 feet tall, 175 pounds. It looked like he was going to flame out of the NBA at one point in time. Now he's turned into a solid backup point guard. That move made a ton of sense for the Hornets. If you're going to lose Graham, replace him with Smith. I have no problem with that at all. The Bulls made another big splash in free agency. They signed Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso on Monday. Yesterday, they agreed to a sign-and trade with the Spurs for DeMar DeRozan. In exchange, the Spurs are getting Al-Farouq Aminu, Thaddeus Young, a first-rounder, and 2 second-rounders. For the longest time, the Bulls tried to develop young guns. Guys like Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah, Jimmy Butler, Chris Dunn, Wendell Carter, etc., etc. And you always thought that the Bulls could sneak into the playoffs. Because on paper, they'd have this young and exciting roster. It never worked. The last time the Bulls made the playoffs was 16-17. That was a roster with a ton of veterans. You had Jimmy Butler in the prime of his career. You had Dwayne Wade. Remember him with the Bulls? You had Taj Gibson in the prime of his career. You had Rajon Rondo. Remember him with the Bulls? Give the Bulls credit for realizing that what they're doing just isn't working, and they have to change up their approach a little bit. DeMar DeRozan is an old school NBA player. He's a mid-range killer. He's a slasher. He plays solid defense. What's the knock on him? He can't shoot. But the Bulls have shooters. Lonzo has turned into a good shooter. Zach LaVine can shoot. Lauri Markkanen can shoot. Nikola Vujovic can shoot. You can have a mid-range sniper if you're the Bulls. I mean, you think of this 10-man rotation for the Bulls. You've got Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine and Kobe White, DeMar DeRozan and Troy Brown Jr., Lauri Markkanen and Patrick Williams, and Nikola Vujovic and Tony Bradley, who the Bulls just signed today. That roster's making the playoffs. That's a roster chock full of guys in the primes of their career, in some cases still getting better. Yesterday the Bulls were a borderline playoff team. Now they're in. I don't see how the Bulls missed the playoffs this year. If they miss the playoffs, Billy Donovan needs to go. I'll skip over some teams that didn't do anything. The Cavs didn't do anything yesterday. Same thing with the Mavericks. Same thing with the Nuggets. And same thing with the Pistons. That brings us to the Golden State Warriors. They brought in a guy who I thought fit the Nets absolutely perfectly. Someone who the Nets supposedly targeted once upon a time. And that is Nemanja Bjelica. They signed him to a 1-year deal worth the veteran's minimum. That's a great move. If you can get a guy like Bjelica for the veteran's minimum, you take it. Again, I'm not sure how the Warriors' front court rotation is gonna shake out. But you cross that bridge when you get there. Outstanding move by the Warriors. And Steph Curry signed a huge extension. He signed a 4-year extension worth $215 million. That's just under $54 million a year. If anyone is worth it, it is Steph Curry. How's this for a stat? And I didn't realize this. Thank you, hoopsrumors.com. Invaluable resource. I said it yesterday, I'll say it again. Steph Curry is the first player in NBA history to sign 2 contracts worth over $200 million. If anyone's worth it, it's the best shooter in NBA history. I don't think the Warriors are a title threat. I do think they'll make the playoffs. But do I view them as a serious threat? The answer is no. Having said that, once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. Let's skip over some other teams. Rockets didn't do anything. Same thing with the Pacers. And same thing with the Clippers. That brings us to the LA Lakers. Like I said, the Lakers are just bringing in everyone. They signed Talen Horton-Tucker to a 3-year deal worth $32 million. They signed Kendrick Nunn to a 2-year deal worth $10 million. And they signed Carmelo Anthony and Malik Monk to minimum salary deals. Can we just agree that giving Talen Horton-Tucker just under $11 million a year is terrible? On no planet is this guy worth $11 million a year? I'll say this. He's a good slasher. Very good at getting to the hoop. He put up 9 points a game last year. That's not nothing. But Horton Tucker's not a great player. That was just a bad move, okay? In all seriousness, that was a terrible, terrible move. Having said that, though, it's negated by bringing in Nunn, Melo, and Monk. Outstanding moves. I can't say anything bad about it. I like Nunn a lot. He's been excellent for the Heat the last couple seasons. Now he gets to be a backup point guard on the Lakers. If you can't beat him, join him, right? Nothing wrong with that. Good job by Nunn. Freaking Carmelo Anthony finds another way to screw over the Nets. Melo would have made perfect sense for the Nets. If you want to stretch four to come off the bench, bring in Melo. I mean, I really thought there was a big chance that Carmelo Anthony would go to Brooklyn. He played for the Knicks. He got that out of his system. It didn't work out. He went ring chasing for other teams. It didn't work with the Thunder. It didn't work out with the Rockets. It didn't work out for the Blazers. Come to the Nets. Win a title for your hometown team. You get to play with James Harden again. I don't know if those two got along, but I'll tell you, the limited time that Melo played for the Rockets, he actually looked pretty good. Now he goes to the freaking Lakers. The Nets' biggest threat to win this year. It's unreal. It's unreal how this guy keeps finding ways to screw over the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, I was very surprised by this. Not because Melo didn't go to the Nets, but because he went to the Lakers. I know that he's friends with LeBron, but I didn't think him and Russell Westbrook got along. Realize they played together for a year in Oklahoma City. I was just under the impression that they didn't get along. If I was wrong about that, I was wrong about that, but that was the impression I was under. Their roster slowly but surely came together, and it's excellent. You can't say anything bad about it. The only concern that you may have is that you've got a couple players there who you worry about their ability to win in the NBA. I don't think Westbrook's game is conducive to winning. Melo's only been to one conference finals. That was in 2009 with the Denver Nuggets. Ironically, he lost to the Lakers in 6 games. Look, I'll say this. I don't think you can win with Westbrook. This year coming up will be the ultimate test of that. Melo, I tend to disagree with that. I always thought that you could win with Melo. Could he be the best player on a title winner? Probably not, but as a role player, yes. Absolutely, 100%. At Syracuse, he won the national title, won Final Four Most Outstanding Player, won 3 gold medals in the Olympics, 08, 12, and 16. You can win with Melo. I don't think you can win with Westbrook. Like I said, this year is the ultimate test of that. But you can win with Melo. That was a great signing by the Lakers. And bringing in Malik Monk was too. How on earth did the Lakers get two really good young free agents? You want to bring in a bunch of veterans, okay, I get that. Everyone wants to go to the Lakers to chase a ring. Fine. But how do you get Kendrick Nunn, who's just 26, and Malik Monk, who's just 23? I don't understand it. Outstanding job by Rob Pelinka. There's no question about it. The Lakers are one of the winners of free agency. You gotta give Pelinka a ton of credit. He took a Lakers team that there were real questions about. Is LeBron going to win again here? Is AD going to win again here? And in a very short period of time, he turned them into a title contender. Like I said, the Nets and the Lakers are neck and neck right now. I'll skip over the Grizzlies since they didn't do anything yesterday. And I'll go to the Miami Heat. They're not done adding help. Markieff Morris will take his talents to South Beach. I thought Morris made sense for the Nets. Again, a stretch 4. Morris had a down year last year. Never really got going with the Lakers. Was solid in the bubble. He won a ring. But last year, he just never got it going. Now you got Morris going to the Heat, backing up PJ Tucker. That's a really good fit for him. A lot of teams in the NBA got exponentially better. The one thing I'll say about the Nets is they didn't. They got better. They added Patty Mills. In essence, they replaced Mike James with Patty Mills. Spencer Dinwiddie doesn't count. He barely played last year. But that's a marginal improvement. You take a look at some of the other teams around the NBA. The Lakers got exponentially better. Same thing with the Heat. Same thing with the Knicks. Same thing with the Bulls. That's like the one thing I'm concerned about as a Nets fan. The Bucks didn't make any official moves yesterday, but there were reports that came out from Shams Charania of The Athletic and Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN that the Bucks were going to sign George Hill and Rodney Hood once they clear waivers. I like Hill. He's a good player. I like him to pass the ball a little bit more, but when you can shoot like him, I can live with it. George Hill is a better shooter than Patty Mills. There's no question about that. 2 years ago, he was a Buck. You know what he did? He led the NBA in three-point percentage. He shot 46% from beyond the arc. And we know the player that Rodney Hood is. He's another really good shooter. He's an underrated rebounder. I've always liked Hood too. The Bucks added a couple shooters to play with Giannis. That's never bad and always good. Good job by them. I'll skip over the Timberwolves. They didn't do anything. The Pelicans really didn't do anything that you need to worry about. That brings us to the Knicks. Yes, I'm aware of the Kemba Walker signing. Okay, that was a fantastic move. The thing is, though, that was announced today. This show's about what happened yesterday. I promise I'll get to Kemba Walker. It's a fantastic move, okay? I will talk about it. I just want to talk about it tomorrow. If I combine Kemba into today's show, I have to combine everything else that happened today into today's show. I just don't want to do that. So I'll talk about Kemba tomorrow. I promise. It's a fantastic move. Okay? I'll give you a little tease about what I'm going to say about it. The Knicks did make a move yesterday. They brought back Taj Gibson, a Tom Thibodeau favorite, someone who had a career renaissance last year, played really good defense, really good rebounder. Bringing him back made a ton of sense. I'll skip over the Thunder. They didn't do anything. That brings us to the Orlando Magic, who brought in Robin Lopez on a 1-year deal worth $5 million. I've never been a big Robin Lopez fan. It's easy to see where all the talent in that family went. I just never thought he was that good. Solid defender, but that's about it. I'm also not crazy about the fit. The Magic already have Wendell Carter and Mo Bamba. What are they doing with Lopez? I get adding some veteran presence to a young Magic team, but bring in someone better. Bring in someone who fills a bigger need. And don't give him $5 million. That was a bad job by the Magic. The 76ers made a couple good moves. They signed George Niang to a 2-year deal worth $6.7 million. And Andre Drummond to a 1-year deal worth the minimum salary. George Niang is the prototypical stretch 4. He's just a catch and shooter. That's all he is. Catch and shoot. You want him to do anything else? Nope. Catch and shoot. We've said for a long time that the Sixers needed shooters. It doesn't get much better than George Niang. I'm not sure how true the notion that they need shooters is, since the reason we were saying that was because they had Ben Simmons on their roster. As of this very moment, Ben Simmons is still a 76er. But I'm skeptical on if he's gonna start the season on the Sixers. It seems like the Sixers want to trade him and Simmons wants out. The fans have turned on him there, and once the Philly fans turn on you, you've got to get out. Because you're not going to be able to get him back. And bringing in Andre Drummond is really interesting. Like, that's a great move. You've got Joel Embiid being backed up by Andre Drummond. A double-double threat when he starts. And he's going to start a handful of games because you know Embiid's going to get hurt. You know he's going to miss some games. That's okay. You just need to prepare for that. The preparation doesn't get much better than bringing in Andre Drummond. I thought he made perfect sense for the Nets last year. He makes a ton of sense for the Sixers here. The Suns signed Abdel Nader to a 2-year deal worth $4.2 million. They brought him back. Nader's a solid player. Solid shooter. Solid rebounder. Not sure how much playing time he's going to get, but if you want to keep him around, I have no problem with that. You want to keep around as much of your roster as possible that made the NBA Finals, that makes sense. I'm fine with giving him $2.1 million a year. This isn't an earth-shattering move or anything, but It is noteworthy. It's a solid move. I can't get upset at it. The Trailblazers brought in Tony Snell. I always liked Snell. He signed a big contract in free agency with the Bucks in 17-18. He never lived up to it, so people kind of turned on him. But the thing is, though, that was an overpay. Snell's a shooter. That's all he is. You gonna blame Snell for not living up to a contract that he never should have gotten? He's not Joe Harris. He's not Norman Powell. He's not Gary Trent. He's not Evan Fournier. Snell's a solid shooter, decent rebounder, decent passer. I like the fit of him with the Blazers. I like the idea of him, Damian Lillard, and CJ McCollum playing together. Obviously, he'll come off the bench for Norman Powell. Good move by the Blazers. I like it. I can get behind it. The Spurs brought back Bryn Forbes. After winning a title with the Bucks, he decided to go back to the team that he spent his first 4 seasons with. That makes sense. I like Forbes. Good shooter. The Spurs are going to be a weird team. You know they're not going to make the playoffs. You know that Popovich is going to make them look better than they actually are. Something tells me we're going to hear retirement rumors about Popovich. The best thing that the Spurs could do would be to move on from Pop, bring in a younger coach, and blow things up. Because there's no way that the Spurs are going to do anything anytime soon. I don't care what they got back from the Bulls in the DeRozan sign and trade. It just doesn't help them a ton. In fact, there are rumors that Thaddeus Young could be bought out and could go back to the Nets. I'd love it. I loved Thaddeus Young with the Nets. When Sean Marks took over as Nets GM, I wanted him to pull Brook Lopez and Thaddeus Young into a room and say, we're building around you. You guys are untouchable. Everyone else is fair game, but we are going to build around you. Would that team have been any good? Probably not. I think it's safe to say that Sean Marks did the right thing by trading Young for the pick that ultimately became Karis LeVert. A pick that I did not like, by the way. His injury concerns scared me too much. But LeVert, when healthy, was really good. And the Nets turned him into James Harden. So job well done by Marks. The Raptors brought Sam Decker back to the NBA. Last year, he played in Turkey. His stats were excellent. I'd be lying to you if I said I saw him play. But if you want to bring in Decker as a backup, and you want to see if he turned his career around, I'm okay with it. I'll end this show with the Utah Jazz finally doing something. The Wizards didn't do anything, so I'm ending with you. They signed Rudy Gay to a 2-year deal worth $12.1 million, and they signed Hassan Whiteside to a 1-year deal worth the minimum salary. I always liked Rudy Gay. I always thought he was incredibly underrated. How's this for a stat? Rudy Gay has never had a season where he has averaged under 10 points a game. And he's been in the NBA since the 06-07 season. I'd love to know how many players through their first 14 seasons in the league averaged over 10 points a game. My guess would be not many. I mean, I love the idea of Gay on the Jazz. Think about this starting lineup. Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Bojan Bogdanovic, Rudy Gay, and Rudy Gobert. You can move Royce O'Neal to the bench where he belongs. You've got Jordan Clarkson there also. You've got Joe Ingles there as well. The Jazz are going to surprise some teams this year. They waited a day to do anything. It was worth it. Outstanding job in bringing in Gay and Hassan Whiteside. Whiteside's a poor man's Rudy Gobert. Gobert leaves to take a breather. You're thinking, okay, you can finally score on the interior. Nope. In comes Hassan Whiteside. Someone who's led the NBA in blocks per game twice in his career. In 15-16, he made an all-defensive team. Someone who can still score on the interior. Someone who can still rebound. Someone who can still defend. Outstanding job by the Jazz. I didn't know it was possible for them to get better. Evidently it was. Great job by them. Tomorrow you may get day 3 of this. Or I may throw in some other sports. I don't know. I'll leave you in suspense. Until then, I am Jacob Valk. And always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.